Okay, so today is going to be a little basic repositioning intro, sort of a tutorial, not really, but this is just how I do it. So this is Procreate. And so the first thing that I always do is obviously I find my reference that I want to use, and then I'll go ahead and create the line art for it. And that's just really basic. I'm not even going to show you how to do that.
So here we go, I have my line art, and I like to make sure that they're like two separate colors. And I like to keep, I usually have a lot of different like layers for the line art. So we've got just the horse here, and then a separate one for the human and the tack and the jump for this instance, because this is a pretty simple edit. There's not a whole bunch of crazy angles and crazy parts that I need separated. I also like to keep a fairly dark background color, and that also depends on the kind of horse I'm editing. If I've got a really like dark horse, like a black horse, I'm gonna make the background like even darker, like this, so that horse pops, because I don't want it like white, because that just hurts my eyes. So I like to keep like really dark background color. You're not even going to see the background in the final edit, but it's just what helps me. But this horse that I'm editing today is, like I said, buckskin, so she doesn't need like a crazy dark background. And the first thing I'm going to do is also drop the opacity of that line art, just so that I can see underneath it too, and make sure my lines are crisp and even. So I'm going to create a new layer and put it under the line art. Next I'm going to go into my photos, and I'm going to insert a photo. So you can go in the game and take screenshots. These are just from an online resource, but I'm probably gonna go take some more photos of my own, because these are not enough for all the angles I'm gonna need. You don't want it to be dark, you don't want any blurring effect on, you don't want the resolution to be really bad, you just want, like, even these photos aren't the kind of photos that I'd usually use, but they work because I'm gonna shade over most of them.
So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna think about the angle of my edit and what photo that I have already here is gonna help me the most, what muscles I'm gonna need for that edit, and how many muscles I can just, and parts of the screenshot I can just use on their own, make it a lot easier for myself. So this is kind of like a 3/4 view. So I would probably go with 2 of these photos and then plus another one for the head. So we're gonna start off with this one so that we can get that chest figured out. This is literally just gonna be for like the shoulders.
Got my photo, and I'm gonna just sort of roughly size it up to about, where it's gonna be on the horse. And usually they don't fit this well, but this is actually surprisingly lining up really well. So once I have that, I'm gonna leave that. And then next, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out the parts of this that I need. So I'm on my layer. I'm gonna go in and tap this little tool, selector tool, and I use the freehand. And all I'm gonna do is just sort of map out and like select what parts of this layer that I need for the shoulder.
So you can see I have that shoulder, everything selected. I'm gonna hit copy and paste. And then usually if I was gonna keep taking different parts of the horse from this like screenshot and creating more of them, I would hide that layer that I just copy and pasted and then go down to my screenshot layer and erase it so that I don't select multiple the same area again, or I don't, overlap too much. So yeah, I don't need anything else from this screenshot. Okay, I should not use that. We got like the front muscles of the horse, and we got that nice shoulder. Okay, so now I don't need this anymore, so I'm gonna delete it. And then I'm gonna hide this as well. I'm gonna go back in and insert another photo. Go down, I like to have albums for all my horses. And now we need this one. So the same thing, this is gonna be for like this belly, this barrel of the horse that we wanna use. Then hide the layer, erase underneath, and then I'm gonna do the exact same thing, but now just right here, so you don't lose too much shape and it doesn't get too warped. Just like that. And then we're gonna take the neck. So boom, we've got our legs. Copy and paste those. And I'm just gonna delete the layer. I don't need it anymore. We're gonna start with this chest. So this is all pretty lined up already, but it's not totally. So I could probably, even with this, I'm gonna go to my warp tool because it's not too drastically different from my reference, my line art. I'm gonna try and line these up with the warp tool, get some of the major positioning out of the way. And now I'm going to go in and hit this little thing and go to Liquify. I'm going to use my push tool. You can kind of figure out what works best for you. And I'm just going to try and help nudge this along just a little bit more. And then I'll go back in and refine it even more later. Just this helps to get all those trickier spots that the warp tool is just like too big and bulky for.
And now that I have this roughly repositioned, I'm going to take my eraser tool. And I just like to use like a hard airbrush. And I'm just going to go in and erase the parts I don't need. I'm not going to worry about down here. I'm not going to worry about this too much because I can just erase it later.
Bada bing, bada boom. Just sort of roughly following those guidelines. And then I'll take off the line art to see if there's any major wonky areas or whatever. So next, we're gonna go ahead and work on this belly. So now that I have this, I'm gonna go ahead and just merge these two together. Just like that. And you can see they're pretty lined up. I'm probably gonna go in and touch that up later. It's just a little wonky, but if you look, there's gonna be a saddle on top of that, so it's not a huge deal. That's perfect. So let's do this hind end. It's actually gonna go on top. So I'm gonna merge that together so you can see the horse is just finally sort of starting to take shape. So exact same thing as before. Okay, so now I'm going to sort of tell you what I do when I have all these gaps, right? Because I don't want to warp that too much and change the shape too much. So instead what I'm going to do is create a new layer below the layer I was just repositioning on. Grab a hard airbrush, select a color similar to these edges, and just fill it in a little bit. And then merge those together. And there you go, it looks kind of stupid, but we'll blend it a little bit later. So none of this has to look good yet, or shaded, because it's not shaded. This is just repositioning. Shading will come later. So now that we have this basic shape of the horse, next what I would do would be the far side legs, or I do the head. The head is gonna get merged onto this layer that I've opened right now. The back, her far legs will not. But once I shade everything, then it's all gonna get merged together into one layer.
The head is like the same basic concept as the rest of the body, you know. I'll put the whole head, basically, well, all of this will be on one layer. I'll reposition it, and I'll move it around and cut it up in a whole bunch of different parts, because the faces, real horse heads are so different than SSO heads, so you've got to change them a lot more repositioning required. And then once that's done, I'll fill in all the gaps again, like before, with the rest of the horse, and then just merge them all down in one layer. And after that, I'll show you what to do next.
So now that I have the head of my horse repositioned, I have all the major repositioning done, my next step is going to be to lightly blend some of these hard edges out. So to do this, I'm going to go to my smudge tool. I'm going to make sure my far legs are on a separate layer. So I'm just going to go to my smudge tool, take a soft airbrush. You can choose whatever you want though. Drop the opacity to about halfway. And then all I'm gonna do is try and just lightly smudge and blur out some of these like really harsh edges, or you know, those colors that I had to block in. And I don't want to, I really want to be careful that I don't over blend and I don't over smudge. It's gonna muddy it all, and you're gonna take away all that texture that comes with the in-game coat in the screenshot. And what you can also do at this time is to get rid of some parts you don't want. For example, I'm gonna get rid of this little braid here. I don't need it. And I'm also gonna get rid of that little like star there because I'm adding my own markings. So you basically just want to be careful, and I'm only going to blend out the areas that have sharp edges, like for example the areas that I had to reposition and cut apart. This is not shading. This is just some minor touch-ups, so when I shade it's not as difficult and it doesn't look as weird. So you're just gonna go ahead and do this throughout the entire horse, wherever you had to make cuts and move things around. Okay, now that I have everything very lightly blended and smudged, no crazy harsh edges that shouldn't be there, I'm gonna go ahead and do my markings. So for example, this horse needs some markings that are not already provided on the in-game model. So to do this, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer, and then I'm gonna go into my photos and select my PNG confirmation image of this horse so I can see her markings. I'm just gonna sort of fit this wherever I need it, and then I'm gonna go ahead and select the layer I would like to add the markings to. Select a nice white color since these are white markings, and I'm gonna add all the shading myself. And then all I'm gonna do is go ahead and select my selector tool and map out those markings onto that layer itself. Being really careful, and this might take a couple tries, you might have to redo it a couple times, but just take your time and work with it until you're happy with it. Once you have it, go ahead and select it, and what I also like to do is feather it just a little bit so it's not such a crazy harsh edge. Grab my airbrush and just fill that all in, and you can see it turns out just like that. Now you just simply repeat for the other legs on that same layer, and then you're good to go. The second to last thing I need to do before shading is going to be this face marking. So I'm going to do the exact same thing as before. Be really careful here and just select straight on that layer with my selector tool, the horse. And then just like before, I'm going to feather it and be really careful, and then fill it in nice and light with that white color. And there you go, there is all her markings done, all good to go. So then the last thing that this horse needs before we can start shading would be her hooves. So I'm going to show you how I do my hooves. So I'm going to take a hard airbrush, and then also a little color palette down here. You can see those colors that I'm tapping through, those 7 colors. Those are all the colors that I use when I make my hooves. I do them myself. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with this darkest color and just fill in the shape of the hoof. Once I have that for both the hooves that are on that layer, I am going to go ahead and take my second lightest color, make a stripe, next color, make a stripe, and so on and so on. I'm going to make sure that these are following the shape of the hoof as best that I can and make sure they are fairly even. So I'm going to do this all the way until I get to my lightest color. And then you're going to repeat that with the other hoof as well. And when doing hooves, I always like to make sure they're on a separate layer so I can do any last shading and whatnot and nothing gets blurred together. Once both hooves for those legs are done, I'm going to take my smudge tool, soft airbrush, drop the size of it, and then go ahead and make up and down vertical strokes following those 2 vertical lines of the hoof and the hoof wall. Make sure you don't overdo this and just play around with it and practice, figure out what sort of smudge tool works best for you. It might take a little bit of time. Do this for the second hoof as well, and then you're pretty much good to go. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope it was helpful in some way. Remember, this is just for basic repositioning and how you sort of like start and edit. I probably won't do a shading tutorial because it takes forever, but the next step for me from here would be to start shading. I'm sorry if I was kind of awkward. I haven't used my voice in a while. But anyways, thank you guys. Bye!